Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Quantum Alignment Show. My name is Betsy. I'm happy to be here with you today. Today's Quantum Alignment Show, we've been in the midst of some pretty big upheaval and around the world, and I live in the United States, so particularly here in the US, and there has been a really incredible surge of activism and calls for social justice. And I've had a lot of questions recently about how we can align our actions and our activism with our design. And so that's what we're going to focus on today in the Quantum Alignment Show, is how to take aligned action by design. So I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation and we can begin. Okay. So I like to say lately that we're in the midst of an evolutionary revolution. Every astrologer that I know has been kind of looking at 2020 and 2021 with maybe some trepidation, or just kind of really steeling themselves a little bit and trying to tell everyone to prepare, because we're in the midst of a really big shakeup right now. The foundation of the systems and structures that we've been living in and working in and existing in haven't been serving everybody equally. And it can't stand anymore, because we are on an evolutionary path towards a world of actual, equitable, sustainable peace. And so the systems that aren't aligned with that need to fall. And so this is big energy. This is big right now. And it's important that we all know how, we can show up in the most aligned way to be of service in creating this better world. And that starts with the dismantling, right? Before we can build the new structures that are aligned. So we're feeling it. We're feeling it right now. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So, this is not something that we're necessarily, I hear a lot of people saying, oh, like, when can this be over and we can just get back to normal, right? We, first of all, honestly, I hope we don't go back to the normal that was. Personally, it wasn't serving everyone. And I really believe that this shakeup we're in right now is serving the highest good of all people and the planet. And we need to do the work to get there. But it's not something that we're necessarily going to get through in a week or a month or a series of months. This big celestial energy of change is going to continue for a little while. So it's important for us to know how we can align our energies to make sure that we can take our rightful place in doing this work and also do it sustainably. We're all called to play a different role in this. So I have to tell you, I was so bummed. I looked and looked. I follow so many activists now on social media, and I'm so grateful to learn from them and their wisdom, people who've been on the ground doing this work for years and years and years. And there was a graphic that was circulating recently about how, especially when the protesting first started, not everyone is necessarily called to be on the front lines of being on the streets physically and with your body, and that there are a lot of different roles that we can all play to be a part of this change, to be a part of this activism, to be a part of, this work. And I can't find the graphic. And I really want to give credit to the person who created it, and I couldn't find it. And I also can't remember all the roles either, but they were talking about, there are people who are called to be out protesting. There are people who are really good at organizing, social organizing. There are people who, as a storyteller, it's like, how can you use your voice to amplify the correct stories, to share information so that, people know about what we're supposed to be doing and where we can be showing up. There's people who, are really called to hold and ground particular energies and particular energetics of where we're going. There's people who are meant to be like emotional support. I mean, this is a lot that we're going through right now. So there's so many different roles that we can play. And it's not all about necessarily going out in the streets and protesting. So, part of this is about understanding what's the role that you are called to play and how can you use your gifts and energies to be a part of the social change that's being called for right now. So in human design, let's start with looking at how does your energy work, right? So a first question I'd like to start with is, do you have sustainable workforce and life force energy? Generator types who have the sacral center defined here, that's this red square. If you have that colored in red, that is a defined sacral center, which makes you a generator type, either a generator or a manifesting generator. And that means you have sustainable work and life force energy. People who have this center open, white, not colored in, that would be my manifestors, projectors, and reflectors, have inconsistent access to that energy. So people with the undefined sacral really need to be sure that they're building in cycles of rest. If you're going, pushing, always feel like you need to be doing something all the time, you can majorly burn out. Let's look at willpower. Do you have, if you're a projector, manifestor, reflector, do you happen to have an open sacral and a defined will? This is a little bit of a conundrum because the will center is the energy to be able to push through and just do something, even if you don't have the energy. But this can lead to burnout, as I was saying before. So Karen always likes to say, the question for the will, the defined will, one of the questions is, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Is it yours to do? So really building in those intentional cycles of rest if you have that open sacral and the defined will center. Looking at the emotional solar plexus, do you have a defined solar plexus? Do you have emotional authority? So if this triangle on the right over here in the body graph is colored in for you, that's your emotional solar plexus, and that gives you a defined emotional solar plexus. And that also gives you an emotional wave that you're going to be riding out. I've talked to a lot of people who have a defined solar plexus who are telling me that their emotional waves are way more intense right now than usual, that their highs and lows, particularly the lows for a lot of people, have felt really low, and maybe they're lasting longer and they just feel like they're more on like an emotional roller coaster. So if you have that emotional wave and it's feeling extra intense for you right now, how can you find ways to channel that energy in a way that works for you? Do you have a creative outlet? Do you paint? Do you write? Do you sew? Do you dance? Do you, enjoy making stories or films or, just some sort of emotional creative outlet for you? Is there some sort of direct action that feels like it's a productive and aligned way to channel that emotional energy? I've seen that for a lot of people, if they're feeling anger, if they're feeling a lot of grief, that actually it gives them the energy to channel that into some kind of direct action. I think that that's what we see a lot when we see people out protesting. That energy of pain, of rage, righteous, anger gets people out in the streets demanding justice, right? So we see that a lot with the protests. So how can you, A, care for your emotional wave and channel that emotional energy into something that's going to be supportive for you? For the head and ajna, are you open or defined? So again, if it's colored in, that means it's defined, and if it's white or not colored in, that means it's open. And we're looking at these top two centers up here in the body graph, okay? So if you have a defined, particularly a defined ajna, but a defined head and ajna, a lot of times you can get very much, you see the world in a very particular way. And I've talked to a lot of people who are saying that in the last couple of months, they kind of feel like their world perspective has gotten cracked open a bit, that, they're suddenly seeing things that they didn't see before. And I'm particularly hearing this from people who have a defined ajna or a combo of the defined head and ajna. So, this can feel like a lot when it's like you have this very clear set way you see the world. It all makes sense to you in the way that you see it. And then suddenly your world gets cracked open and it's like, whoa, I don't know what to do with this, So just to have an awareness of that. And if you have an open head or ajna, you might find that you're having a hard time holding on to a belief or an understanding about what's happening. A lot of times, people with the open head and ajna, I have that configuration, we're picking up the inspirations, the thought forms, the beliefs, those, thinking energies and data processing energies from people around us, and we're amplifying it so it can shift depending on who we're around. So, are they changing all the time? Are you finding it a struggle to maybe, I've heard this from a lot of people even, before the Black Lives Matter protests and everything have escalated and broken out to, you know, say that even in COVID, it's like, oh my God, I feel like I don't know what the truth is, you know, and it's because this is a new disease and there's new information coming out all the time. And so, you know, these are things to think about. It's like, are you feeling like frustrated or struggling to grab onto that certainty, which can be a struggle for the open head and ajna? And how can you allow yourself to kind of flow with more holistic thinking, with holistic understanding? Let's talk about sensitivity. And I'm particularly for people with the open G center, which is this diamond in the middle, if it's white, or the solar plexus, which I mentioned earlier, if it's open over here. These are places of heightened sensitivity in the chart. When they're open, the open G center is highly sensitive in that it feels, it's the identity center. You feel people, you feel where they are, you feel what they're going through, and you can often feel the collective energy of a place as well. That's why right people and right place are so important for the open G. And then the open solar plexus, you know, these are our empaths, right? People who pick up on the emotional energy of other people and amplify it. So I've talked to a lot of people who have one or both of these open centers, and, you know, a lot of times it can feel like you're taking in that energy from people just in your immediate aura, your immediate space. And right now there's so much collective energy up. It can feel like just so big and so heavy for people with these open centers. So please just understand, if you have the sensitivity, just know this about yourself, finding ways to discharge that energy. Because if you're, I know that I've gone through cycles of this, and most people I know have too, of, you know, it's like, oh, it just can really bog you down, feeling the weight of the pain in the collective body right now, to feel like you don't even know what to do with your energy, you don't know what to do or where to put your time and attention. You know that you feel like you need to do something, but you don't know what, and feel very overwhelmed. So as much as you can find ways to discharge that, a lot of times getting out in nature can do this, you know, taking a walk in the woods. If you live near a body of water like a lake or an ocean, you know, going and literally just jumping in the water, taking a hot shower, sometimes journaling, meditation. These are all really good ways. If you work with crystals, if you have, you know, any kind of way that you can discharge emotions and energies from within your system, now is a really good time to be doing that, whether it's once a day or multiple times a day, certainly before bed. Highly recommend that. Let's look at the root center. The root center is down here at the bottom. This is our doing energy in the chart, right? And the root center has a distinct pulse, an on-off pulse of doing energy. So if your root center is defined, you may find that you feel kind of almost similar to like a defined emotional solar plexus, like a wave of, you know, doing energy, and then it goes off and you feel like you just don't have the energy to do anything. It's really good to follow that pulse. You know, if you feel like that pulse is on and you have the energy to do things, like, go for it. And if it's off, maybe use that as a way to take a cycle of rest for yourself and restore your energy and your resources, so that when the pulse comes back on, you have what you need to do it. And then an open root, if this, you know, root center is white or not colored in, can feel under pressure to do things. So a lot of my people with open root centers right now find that they are just feeling the pressure all the time, like, oh, I got to be doing. I always have to be doing something. If I'm not doing something, it's not enough. And so, you know, really just finding ways to manage that pressure, to follow the pulse of that doing energy, and to resist any pressure that you might have when you feel like you don't have the energy to be doing. Okay. And then the will center on its own, we talked a little bit about this in conjunction with an open sacral, but the will center, particularly if it's open, can find that it can feel a need to prove itself. So, you know, there are a lot of people who feel like, I think as we're unpacking a lot of things around privilege, looking at the systems and structures we've been living in and how they've been serving people unequally, it brings up a lot of shame. It brings up a lot of guilt, and a lot of feelings that we need to process through. You know, we're showing up because it's an integrity thing, you know. The world is out of integrity when it doesn't serve people equally. This isn't about you needing to prove you're a good person, right? And actually a lot of times when people show up for social justice because they feel like they need to prove that they're a good person, you know, really the shame and guilt are carrying forward with you. And that's a process that you need to work through on your own, you know, as part of the work that you're doing internally. But, you know, the guilt and the shame as a motivator, you know, it's much better to be motivated by a desire to create something new and to rise up for other people and for what you're standing for. Because ultimately, you know, if we're anti something, we're for the better world that exists on the other side of it. So do you feel a need to prove something? Do you feel like you need to show up constantly to prove that you're good enough? You know, and working through that as part of the work as well, and just being aware of it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about fear consciousness, right? Fear is majorly up in the collective right now. Just a little science here. I thought this was interesting. They say we have 3 brains. The very like center of our brain is what they call the reptilian brain, which controls like your basic physical functions that you need to live, like breathing, eating, temperature control, going to the bathroom, you know, things like these are the things that are autopilot. We don't think about them. The body just functions, right? That's the center. The second brain that is around that is the limbic system. We share this part of our brains with other mammals, like dogs, cats, horses. This is the part of our brain that controls emotion, like fear, memory, and mood. So, and then the neocortex, which is the third layer or the third brain around that, is in evolved primates and humans. And this is the development of abstract thinking, evolved thinking, language, imagination, things like that. So you can see that, you know, over the course of evolution, our brains have grown and evolved as well. So the fear response, at least according to current science, from what I can tell, this is always evolving. And if I have this wrong and you have scientific research to back it up and I'm behind the times, please feel free to correct me. But all my research has shown that fear supposedly lives in the amygdala, which is part of the limbic system, which is part of that second brain, right? It's more evolved than our reptilian brain of just keeping us alive, but not quite as evolved as the neocortex. And so, you know, there are some people who say that fear is like a lower level of consciousness. I don't know about that, but it does live in that like second brain. We're really being confronted by the collective energy of fear right now and being asked to look at what and who are we taught to be afraid of and why, you know, with the research that, you know, studies show that people are kind of taught to be just more intrinsically afraid of Black and brown people, people with darker skin. We have a heightened fear response to that. Why is that? That's conditioned. It's not based on any sort of, you know, physical reality. Where is fear running our lives, consciously or unconsciously? How can we overcome or move through that fear to live more authentically and create a less fearful world? I think that this energy of fear came up first around COVID, you know, when quarantine first started, and with all of us kind of really looking at, wow, you know, what are we afraid of and what are we fearing and how is fear playing a role in our lives? And, you know, seeing it again now with, you know, the civil rights movement that's sweeping across the country. You know, why have we been conditioned to be so afraid of our darker skinned brothers and sisters than lighter skinned people? I heard this poem by this brilliant poet and I just loved it. I'm not going to do as good a job as he does of reciting his own work, but learned fear can be overcome when you realize the voice inside your head is not yours. It's an imitation of the voices from before, repeating on a loop inside your quiet core, and you can't tell the difference because it sounds the same. But trust me when I tell you, most of what you think is from somebody else's brain. So I thought that was really beautiful and, you know, speaks to the conditioned fear, you know, that we live out sometimes that holds us back. So fear can hold us back from living authentically, from taking aligned action. If we're feeling afraid of any number of things, you know, it can really cause us to become stagnant or to get stuck in inaction. So in human design, fear lives in the spleen center, which is over here. And the spleen is the center for intuition, for health, survival, and time. So when I talk about intuition, we're talking about that that survival instinct intuition, that like primal, there's a bear run kind of intuition. And, you know, some of this is biologically programmed. You know, in my research, it was showing it's there are a lot of scientists who are trying to discern right now, you know, how much of fear is like passed on genetically versus, you know, how much is conditioned into us. And there are, you know, I guess they've shown some fear responses that babies will show, like if they get close to an edge or something, you know, to be afraid of an edge like a cliff, because, you know, for their survival, they need to not go crawling off a cliff, right? So that makes sense. But that a lot of our other fear responses either come out of lived experience or they're conditioned into us by our circumstances or by our culture, by our surroundings. So the fear lives in the spleen. So let's talk about the fear expressions of the spleen a little bit. Over here we have gate 48 on the spleen. This can be the fear of inadequacy or not knowing enough. If you're looking at your, you know, activism, sometimes this can show up in, oh, you know, I need to take, and just to be clear, before we start speaking about, you know, certain issues or whatever, I think that there is a really big call, particularly for white people right now, you know, if we're looking at white privilege or something like that, to, you know, there is a need to educate ourselves and to find our blind spots and to understand how there are certain pieces that we've been living out that, you know, we just haven't had awareness of because we haven't needed to. It hasn't directly impacted our life. So, you know, this isn't saying that you should just go out necessarily and start speaking if you have no background on a topic or haven't done the work. However, the gate 48 is the gate of depth. And so a lot of times these are people who actually are the ones who are just instinctively and innately diving in, doing all the learning and the research and self-development and work on themselves. But they sometimes can feel like they never know enough to do the thing. You know, I need another degree, I need another certification, I need to take another program or training. And, you know, that fear of not knowing enough or of inadequacy can keep you always in inaction of never actually doing anything. And it's, you know, there needs to be a discernment at some point of, okay, I know enough to jump in here at least and start doing my part, and knowing that I might mess up along the way, right? And I'm open to being called out for that, and I want to show up for this, right? Gate 57 is a highly intuitive gate, and it can sometimes have a fear of the future, a fear of what it knows. I've seen this coming up for a lot of people with this astrology right now, particularly when there's a lot that's, you know, feels unknown or unpredictable. And it's, you know, if you feel like you see things that are hard, or, you know, something hasn't worked out in the past, or, you know, are you operating out of a fear of the future? Gate 44 can have a fear of the past, actually, that past patterns will keep repeating. And that can be the fear of the gate 44. Gate 50 is a highly nurturing gate. It's half of the maternal archetype in the human design chart. So gate 50 can have a fear of failing its responsibility, feeling a really deeply responsible for caring for other people, and have a really deep fear of failing people in that responsibility of caring for them and doing right by them. Gate 32 can have a fear of failure. This is part of the business circuitry in the human design chart. And it can sometimes just have a fear that if it goes for what it knows and, you know, takes action on what it sees and what's possible, that it will fail, and a fear of, you know, of that failure leading to inaction as well. Gate 28 in traditional human design is called the gate of struggle. Sometimes people with this gate endure more life challenges than other people. They might feel like life is harder for them than others. I'm going to talk about the high expressions of all these gates in a moment, so we'll get more into that. But sometimes people with this gate can feel like life has no meaning, or that things are going to be too hard, because it feels like things have been so hard for them. And so if they just are, it's like, oh, well, what's the point? Or it's just going to be too hard. Why even try? That kind of mentality. Gate 18 is a corrective energy and can sometimes carry a fear of imperfection or of never getting it right, because it can so clearly see, you know, how things need to be aligned and restructured, that it can just have a fear of imperfection. So again, all of these can just lead to stagnation or inaction and holding yourself back from stepping forward into your gifts and being a part of the change, right? And fear has that capacity to just keep us in inaction, keep us stuck, keep us in cycles of fear and just never moving outside of that comfort zone. And, you know, sometimes it helps to be aware of the specific expressions of fear that we might be living out, and these energetic themes of fear so that we can know where it's helpful to be able to push through that and kind of do it anyway sometimes. So if you're trying to discern, because again, the spleen is also the center for intuition, right? So where is this like a fear response, or where is this an intuitive knowing? And there's some discernment involved in that. So I guess a good first question is, are you actually in like mortal danger? You know what I mean? Like, is your health in danger? Is your well-being in danger? Is your life at risk? If yes, then that's probably a pretty good fear response you want to listen to, right? But a lot of times we actually these days feel like that same intensity of fear around something as though it would kill us, or, you know, but that it won't. It won't. And, you know, it's interesting because I've seen some videos circulating recently of particularly, you know, white women who, you know, that video that was circulating, for example, of Amy Cooper in the park, or I just saw another one of another woman who had been very rude and screamed a racial slur out her window at a black man who was driving, and he followed her and just to talk to her and, you know, tell her it wasn't okay. And they must have been like 10 to 12 feet apart. He was nowhere physically near her. And she had her hands up on her face, like physically shaking, screaming that he was attacking her. And he was standing calmly, just speaking to her in a totally normal tone. And it just struck me in that moment to see the like discrepancy between someone who I could tell she was like, it didn't seem faked to me per se. It seemed like she was really afraid. And he was standing very far back, just speaking to her and totally calm. And I was just struck by that, like, wow, you know, what has this woman learned or internalized that would make her so afraid of a black man in that way, that in a totally normal setting where, you know, someone's just trying to speak to you, you could be afraid just by someone's very presence. And so, you know, looking at the discrepancy between, is my fear response warranted for the physical circumstances I find myself in or not, right? So if you are not actually in danger, try pushing through your fear and doing it anyway. And you might find that your fear is holding you back from important growth and evolution, right? And, you know, I hear a lot of, and I'm talking a lot about the Black Lives Matter movement and racial justice in the US right now, because that's the work that I'm personally engaged in on myself. It's what's up in the collective right now here. It's timely, it's important. Frankly, it's long overdue to actually build systems of equity and justice in this country around racial equity. So I'm speaking a lot to that. But you know, and I've been doing a lot of my own unpacking as well as part of this to look at where my blind spots have been. And, you know, I think that there can be, there's a conundrum, you know, in that of unpacking our own stuff and then feeling like afraid to speak out, say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. And, you know, all of the activists that I'm listening to have just, you know, really been saying it's like, show up anyway, you know, that showing up and doing your best and speaking out for the things that are important is better than silence, because silence becomes complicity, you know? And so, you know, how do we push through the fear of showing up in the wrong way, right? And if someone comes and corrects us, being willing to take that feedback and say, thank you, I learned something, I'll do it differently now, you know? But not letting it hold us back from showing up for what's important. So when we feel these fears, I think it's also really helpful to remember the high expression and the purpose of these energies of the spleen, right? Because every energy of the chart has a challenge and it also has a gift. So, you know, how do we live out the high expression of the spleen to show up fully present right now for this critical moment in history to build greater equity, sustainability, and peace? So the high expressions of the spleen, starting with gate 48 where we started before, again, this is the gate of depth. These are people who jump in and just really love diving in and learning and getting all this information. They're amazing foundational resources for people, kind of like the first line profile. So gate 48 is, I know what I need to know when I need to know it, trusting in that. And I know enough to follow my calling. It's trusting that you have enough knowledge to walk the path, and being open to receiving more information, education, and learning along the way as you go. Gate 57 is deep psychic intuition. This is like, it really can be psychic knowing. It's knowing how you know without knowing how you know, you just know. And so the high expression of this gate is trusting that, trusting what you know, trusting your intuition, and knowing that you will have the intuition and knowing of right timing, right, for what you're being called into, and to bring that intuition and that knowingness into form. Gate 44 is the gate of truth. This is also part of the business circuit. It's knowing when something is out of integrity. And we're seeing that a lot right now, right? It's like, where have untruths been spoken? Where have untruths been taught? Where have we learned or experienced or lived through untruths? And how do we support the planet and humanity in correcting ourselves so that we can come back into integrity, full integrity, to build this better world? Gate 50, again, is that maternal archetype of nurturing. It's knowing when something or someone needs to be cared for, right? It's being able to look around in your community and see, all right, who's in need right now? These people are emotionally struggling. This person, I don't know when the last time is that they ate. I'm going to check on this person and see if they're doing okay emotionally. This is a lot, These are our nurturers, right? Gate 50. Gate 32 is a gate really of inspired action. Again, part of the business circuit. It's knowing the right time to bring big ideas to fruition. And acting on that, because again, timing is such a key thing. The other half of gate 32 is a channel that connects to the root, all about timing, right? So it's that innate knowing of right time. Gate 28, I talked about being the gate of struggle, and it is. I have this gate, as does Cindy, who's on the line with me today. I have started talking about the gate 28 as really being, people with the gate 28 I've found are some of the most compassionate people I know. They're people who have been through it. They've been through the fire. They've come out the other side. Because they've gone through those big challenges themselves, they know what it feels like. They can empathize and support other people through that. Extremely compassionate people. And they know that the point of the challenge is about integrating the lessons that we need to help us evolve. So we just happen to be in a very challenging moment of human history right now, are we not? There is a lot of challenge on a lot of levels right now, and there is a higher purpose to all of this, right? We have to remember that the goal of all of this isn't just to burn it down or dismantle just to take things apart. It's because we have a higher vision of what we can create, where everyone can be equal, where everyone can live in dignity, where everyone can be truly free, right? So this gate 28 is a teaching energy. I teach what is meaningful, and knowing how to support humanity in expanding consciousness with that compassion, with that understanding of what really matters, and supporting us and guiding us along that path. And then gate 18, again, is that corrective energy. It sees patterns that are out of alignment and knows what needs to be corrected to bring about greater alignment and joy. So again, I think all of these energies are certainly, really pertinent right now, but we are in a cycle of needing to correct some really big patterns, systemic patterns, systems that have not been supporting all people and actually have been detrimental, have been harmful to certain groups of people. And this gate 18, this corrective energy, is so necessary for us to see what can be corrected to bring about that greater alignment, right? So these are all gifts that you can use in your activism, right? In uncovering how you can be of service. I mean, every single gift of the spleen that I just spoke about is magic. We need all of it. I mean, I was talking about showing up in different roles, like maybe they all just live right here, being this, informational resource for people. Can you spread that information? Sharing your knowing, being deeply connected with where we need to go, helping to bring people back into integrity, nurturing those who need nurturing, the people who are out on the front lines of all this, these incredible activists who have been doing this work, engrossed in this work for years and years, you know, listening to them, uplifting them, supporting them, nurturing them, the people who are out on the front lines. How can we support the people who need it? Inspired action, knowing the right timing for different actions. You know, what do we need to do when? Because when it's the right time, then things will catch and evolve more gracefully, right? Compassion, compassionate teaching, you know? We need the people who are able to look at the people who are just waking up to some of this and say, hey, I get it. I know where you are. I see where you are. How can we support you in moving you through compassionately this struggle and this challenge of waking up so that we can all get to the other side of it, right? And then correction, realigning those patterns. So, you know, looking at the gifts of all of this, how can we bring that into our activism can just be so, so, so potent. All right, let's talk about how we can use our voice a little bit also, because we're being called to do that right now too, right? And a lot of this is what activism truly is about how do you use your voice in the correct way. So one of the things that's happening particularly in the, you know, Black Lives Matter movement right now here is, you know, we're really being asked, and by we, I'm talking to white people like myself, to pass the mic, right? To center the voices of those who live with marginalized identities. And the reason for this is because the people who are closest to the pain are the ones who can speak the best about how to alleviate their own suffering and to meet their needs, right? And because there's so many social justice organizations that have been around for so long, that are on the ground, in the trenches, fighting for local communities and knowing what people really need. And so how can we support them in being the voices that we're amplifying and speaking to? And, you know, I said at the top of this presentation, you know, that this class isn't about telling you what to do, because I know very, very well that I'm not the person to tell you that, you know. It's my job to say, you know, look to these people for action items. Look to these people for how we can, you know, be the best of service. And, you know, the point of this presentation is about how do you align your energies so that you can do that, so that you can show up for that work, right? So how does this make you feel, you know, to be asked to pass the mic, to not always be the one to speak, right? To amplify the voices of others who've been doing this work and who are the closest to this work, and to possibly integrate that, you know, for some of us, myself included, the best thing we can do is uplift other people to speak right now. How do you add your voice to the call for necessary change? So let's look at the throat center and how you're designed to communicate. The throat is the center for communication and manifestation, right? It's also the gearbox of the chart. It's how we move our energy. So all the energies from the rest of the chart all want to make it to the throat in order to move. If you don't have a motor center connected to the throat, which I'll talk about, I'll show you in just a minute if you don't know what the motor, where the motors are. You know, that speaking and talking through things is a way that you can actually move your energy. So, you know, we were talking about discharging energy, or, you know, knowing how your energy operates earlier on. For if you're a projector or even a manifestor, reflector, and sometimes even generators, because, you know, even if you have a defined throat, if it's not motorized, you know, having a sounding board. Not a manifestor. Manifestors have motorized throats. Scratch that. Projector, reflector, generator. If you're one of those types, it can help you to discharge your energy by talking through it, talking through your feelings, talking through what you're experiencing, talking through stuff with people who, you know, you trust and who see you and get you and can be compassionate. So if your throat's defined, the other centers that make it to your throat that are, if you can take like a pencil and draw a line from a channel between one center and another, that's a center that's connected to your throat. That's going to inform part of what you're gifted at communicating about. So I'll go back so you can see the body graph. So, you know, if you have your head or your ajna connected to your throat, you know, maybe you're really good at communicating about inspirations and ideas. If you have your G center connected to your throat, the diamond in the middle, you know, you are probably really good at speaking from the core of who you are, speaking about identity, speaking about direction. If you have your will center connected to your throat, you're probably really good at speaking about yourself and who you are, but you might also be really good at speaking about value. People who have the emotional solar plexus connected to the throat are going to be really good at talking about their feelings, communicating about emotion. People with the sacral connected to the throat are going to be good at talking about, you know, their work, their workforce energy, their life force energy. People with the spleen connected to the throat, you're probably really good at speaking your intuition, that intuitive knowingness, communicating that. And the root center, if it's connected to the throat, you're probably really good at talking about what you're doing. Motorized versus unmotorized throats. So these are the 4 motors in the chart: the will, the emotional solar plexus, the sacral, and the root center, okay? So if one or multiple of these are connected to the throat, and again, it can be through all kinds of different channels. This is just an example showing you how these, you know, you can take a pencil, draw a line, it makes it directly to the throat. So it can, I mean, the sacral center could go through any one of these other centers to get up, same with the root or any of these. If you have a motorized throat, you might actually find it harder to wait to speak, and you might find it more difficult to take on the task of passing the mic the way that you're being asked to, right? Of uplifting other people's voices instead of being the one to speak. And if not, if you have an unmotorized throat, again, that's my generators, projectors, and reflectors, you'll be better heard and make more of an impact if you actually wait to be invited to speak anyway. And that's actually what's being called for in these times. Well, okay. Sorry, for white people, because we're uplifting, you know, the activists and the voices of color in our communities. So, you know, if you are a Black person, if a bi POC, you know, flip that, flip that script. You know, if you have a motorized throat, you know, you will probably find it easier to take that mic. And maybe you have been. Maybe you've actually been the one out and screaming about how, you know, you know, this is happening and people haven't been hearing you, or, you know, the systems and structures haven't been set up to listen to you, and it's probably been really, really painful. And now people are finally starting to listen. Whereas people who have unmotorized throats, you might actually find it a little more difficult to make yourself heard even about things that matter to you. And so just knowing that if you have an unmotorized throat, you know, if you push too hard to communicate, you know, you can actually fry your thyroid, burn yourself out. So, you know, either being invited to speak, waiting to be invited to speak, this goes for everyone, or, you know, you can also do the little backdoor hack thing of asking, you know, hey, can I have the mic, right? And then if someone says yes, that's your invitation. If someone says like, no, back up, you know, then listen to that too, because you won't be heard well if people aren't open to receiving what you have to offer. Let's look at the gifts of the throat real quick, okay? The gates that are off the throat here. So gate 62 is a super grounded energy. It understands all the little like details that need to happen to make a big idea happen. So gate 62 is probably really good at understanding and communicating about those details, and we need these people. You know, we can have lots of big ideas and lots of big actions, but if we're not in the details of it, you know, sometimes we just need that to make it happen. Gate 23 is all about new perspectives, new big mutative ideas and perspectives, opening up people's perspectives of the way they see the world. Gate 56 is a sacred storyteller. So these are the people who have like a really big gift of using language to help people understand, you know, we're talking about helping people see their blind spots, right? Helping people see things they haven't seen before, or talking about the new world that we're trying to build. You know, people with this energy, this storytelling energy, can be really good at like using language to construct a visual, a framework that helps people feel and understand and see what's possible. It's the framework for understanding possibility. Gate 35 is a super wise energy, the wisdom of experience. Sometimes this gate is called the jack of all trades, kind of like a been there, done that energy, but it understands from having been there and done that, the experiences that are worthwhile of putting our energy into. So, you know, we need that wise energy right now as well. Gate 12 here is part of a channel that connects to the emotional solar plexus. And this is this can be a gate of channeling, a gate that's really connected to super consciousness and can just totally drop in downloads. It's kind of a creative voice, again, being connected to the solar plexus on the other side of the channel. Gate 45 is the gate of the king or queen. This is a wise teaching energy, and it's a voice that knows how to speak for the collective good. It knows, you know, what the collective needs and can be kind of a leader in speaking to that. Gate 33 is another storytelling energy, but this is more the energy of the wise historian, of knowing where we've been so that we can know where we're going. And you see a lot of that coming up in the collective too right now, around civil rights, of saying, hey, you don't actually know your history, because a lot of the history that we're taught in schools is not the reality, is not the lived history and experience for Black and brown people, for Indigenous people in this country. And so a lot of us are doing a lot of relearning of what actually happened here. And we need to know the truth of our history. We have to understand where we've been so that we can know where we're going and understand what we need to build next. Gate 8, this is part of a channel that's all about feeling really, really pushed to be of service in the world. It feels a high call to purpose. It's about authentic expression. And it's really about, you know, you hear the phrase, be the change you want to see, right? That's this. I want to give a quick shout out to a woman named Carla Russo. She works with human design. I follow her on Instagram. And she had like the best definition of gate 8 that I think I've ever heard, which is don't talk about it, be about it. And I was like, yes. So Carla, thank you for that one. I'm going to walk with that forever for gate 8. Don't talk about it, be about it. And, you know, we're seeing a big call for that right now with social justice right now also. It's like, you know, it's great to post and share on social media, but how are you taking action and showing up to actually make it a reality? Gate 31 is the democratic voice of leadership. This is a leadership energy that is recognized and uplifted by the collective the way we democratically elect a leader. So it's natural leadership energy, and it's energy that is elevated by the collective. Gate 20 is super charismatic, a very charismatic energy, and it also has the real gift of being able to see and identify the gifts and talents of the people around it and like coalesce people around a particular idea in a way for it to bring that to fruition. So I actually think in these times, you know, the 20 is a really great energy for community organizer. I found also that a lot of people that I know who like work in HR or, you know, are really like about team building have the gate 20 also. And then gate 16 is an energy that's super enthusiastic, got really a lot of natural talent, unafraid to kind of jump in and try things, sometimes to the point of needing to actually pull that enthusiasm back a little bit. But it's a really big gift of enthusiasm and of really like encouraging people forward and into action as well. So, you know, as you're thinking about how you can show up, use your voice. If you have any of these gates off your throat, this is another place to get inspired about, you know, ways that you can be active. You know, are you able to, you know, take action in helping people understand the details and helping them see things from a new perspective in a way they haven't seen it before? Are you able to help them with your words and your language see, you know, the big picture of what's happening and where we're going, and encourage people through stories and narrative to join the movement and join the call forward? You know, do you have that wisdom of experience that you can speak to, you know, of where it feels correct to put our energy? Do you have the ability to, you know, communicate downloads that you're receiving just in totally, you know, intuitive of, okay, this is what's needed right now, or this is what's coming? Are you able to be a voice for the collective to see what people need and speak to that and be kind of a leader in that way? Do you know where we've been? Do you have a really good understanding of history to help people understand that so that we can create a better future? You know, are you able to really show up authentically and just through your authentic expression be part of creating that change? Again, are you a leader? Are you meant to be on the forefront of some of this? Are you charismatic? Do you know how to unite people around an idea or an action? And can you enthusiastically invite people forward into taking action and into this movement of making important change? So remember that the energy of the throat is the energy of manifestation. So using your gifts to manifest change so that we can create a better world where all people are equal, where all people are free, where all people have dignity, and remembering that the time is now. The time is now. All right, so what did we talk about today? I talked about a lot of things. First, know your gifts, right? Where do your gifts lie? What do you have to offer? What are you bringing to this movement forward into creating a better world? Second, know how your energy works. how much energy do you have to act sustainably? That's the key, right? Because if you just push and push and push and do and do and do and go and go and go, you know, you're no good to anyone. You're no good to, you know, this wave of evolution forward if you're burnt out and have nothing and are on the couch, right? So how do you do it sustainably? And how is that energy best spent, right? How is it going to make the biggest impact? And how is it going to be sustainable for you? Moving through your fear. Where is your fear holding you back from showing up fully? And remembering the gifts of the spleen, how are you able to take the gifts that lie on the other side of fear and use them to show up for social change? Prioritizing rest. How can you create restorative habits so that you can be more sustainable, right? And again, that can be literal rest, like are you getting enough sleep, right? Are you moving your body? It can be the prioritization of discharging energy, you know, from the places in your design where you're open and picking that up on the collective where it might be just bogging you down, weighing you down so that you can't act, right? Meditation. And finally, knowing your communication style. How can you communicate the most effectively so that you can be heard and make an impact with what you have to bring and what you have to offer, right? I want to just end with something that my sister, I have a really amazing sister who is brilliant. She has developed and teaches her own, I don't even know how to classify it. It's like a holistic health, wellness, spiritual mind, body practice called Come Alive. And she sent an email out today. And she's a beautiful writer and she inspires me. But I want to quote her quickly. Her name is Danny Parker. And she wrote this. She wrote, when a river flows, it brings sediments with it. Sand, pebbles, cobblestones, twigs, and leaves. And when the sediments move and slide along the riverbed of solid rock, erosion occurs. And when the flow of the river remains powerful and consistent, the entire structure of the solid rock can be broken down and dismantled. So I want you to remember, that you make a difference. You might feel just like a tiny piece of sand or a twig or a little rock, you know, flowing along that river. But when we have the sediment, we have all of us flowing powerfully in one direction, we have the ability to erode the rock that's underneath the systems and structures that have existed previously and create something new. So thank you all for being here today. Cindy, I'm not sure if we've had any comments. And it actually looks like, Cindy, that you're spotlighted here. So I'm not sure if anyone can see me. Looks like I'm seeing Karen's picture there.
You'll see it. I'm seeing you, and I'm seeing you on Facebook. So that's one of the ways I can tell.
Excellent. I'm very glad to hear that.
And so great presentation there. I know there was one question. Who wrote the poem that you first, was it N-hyphen?
I-N-Q. I don't actually know how to pronounce it, if it's ink or in-Q. I heard him on a podcast speaking about the energies of fear. I can go back and find the podcast because he's brilliant. And you should hear that. That's only an excerpt from that particular poem that's all about fear. So I just honestly didn't have enough space or time to quote the entire poem, but you should look into him. He's a brilliant wordsmith.
People are saying very informative.
Oh, thanks, y'all.
Many people have, like Lynn said, she had 6 throat gates defined.
Yeah.
Awesome presentation. Okay, I'm going back to Facebook now. There was a question or comment on Facebook. Oh, well, it's kind of a comment, and she's hoping to learn, but Darlena Davis-Watson says, I have both these centers open. I think this is way towards the beginning, so I think we're talking about G and
Okay.
Center. And my husband left Tuesday for a rehab stint
Mm,
for an addiction she had no knowledge of.
mm.
She's been overwhelmed and flip-flopped emotions constantly. She felt drawn to this video on what you said. She's hoping to plug into these ideas.
Beautiful.
Um,
Yeah, Darlena, and just to tell you, I mean, we're experiencing a lot of shakeups in the collective, and I can't tell you how many people I have talked to who are simultaneously experiencing really big shakeups in their personal life right now. And it all feels like it's happening at once, and it all feels really overwhelming. And so, I think, again, finding ways to nurture and care for yourself, because some of it is just, when you get thrown into a really tumultuous life experience, when that solid foundation feels like the rug's pulled out from under you, there's all kinds of ups and downs that can come along with that. So part of this is about our design, and part of it is our lived experience as well, and what tools do we have to support us in moving through things that are hard. And that was where also I was actually talking to the emotionally defined people about how to navigate their wave, right? Of, do you have something you can channel that energy into? Do you have a creative pursuit? Do you have, comforting, you have a spiritual practice? Do you have community to help hold and support you?
that's all
Anything
in
to navigate
your
that.
aligned action.
Yeah.
You find the communities to support you, and that you can be a support person in community.
Yeah.
Darlena also said, Betsy, this was so timely for me. I think I can ponder this stuff and hold my frequency and not just evolve into an old pre-human design thinking.
Oh,
Thank you for this terrific lesson.
thank you so much.
Moni says, any advice for completely open throat? No activations on the throat.
So anywhere where you're open are going to be places where you're taking in the energy from outside of you and amplifying it, right? So a completely open throat, you'll probably find that your communication style is going to vary greatly depending on who you're around or where you are. So, feeling into that, and the open throat really has the ability to be like a voice for the room, right? I mean, like Oprah has an open throat. I haven't looked at her chart recently. I can't remember if she has any gate activations on there, but I know she has an open throat. So, just knowing that that's also the gift of the open throat is being able to shift and adjust your communication style based on who you're around so that you can be best heard and speak to what people need. And just, even to be mindful of that, of knowing that about yourself, that you might find that you communicate differently based on who you're around. And hey, if you get around someone with a motorized throat, if you get around a manifestor, manifesting generator, you might suddenly have all this power that you feel to be able to speak and communicate in a totally different way. So it could just be interesting for you to notice how you communicate differently around different people.
That is an interesting thing. Nanette asked a question, and it also came up on Facebook, but I saw other people were commenting on it. I came in a little late and wonder if you went over how we look at these gates, if they were red versus black. So if the gates or channels were red versus black.
Sure. So anything that's black in your chart is going to be part of what we call your conscious definition. So that is based on the exact moment that you were born, which is what we always ask for your birth time for, right? The red definition on your chart is what we call unconscious definition, which is delineated, or it's determined 88 astrological degrees, or approximately 3 months before your birth. And in human design, they say that's when the soul decides to incarnate. So Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, that the conscious definition is tied more to soul purpose, and the red unconscious definition is tied more to life purpose. And that, so I guess there are some people who say that the red unconscious definition sometimes can feel like a more like innocent expression of something that maybe you have less conscious awareness of, where other people might know or understand it about you, but you have less of a conscious understanding of it or awareness of it yourself, versus the conscious definition, which maybe you would have a little more ability to like work with,
You'd be
or
more
have
familiar with it.
more familiar, even more like quote unquote control over. I don't really like the word control anymore, but I mean, frankly, I find that a lot of people who are on spiritual paths are people who are committed to doing their work. You know, by the time you hit like 40-ish, you know, midlife, you've lived enough life that know yourself well enough that a lot of people will operate from both definitions pretty evenly. But sometimes if you find that you're having a struggle or an experience with a particular energy and it shows up in your unconscious definition, sometimes that can be why. If it's, you know, it just is something you're less conscious of, it can feel more like it's operating through you as opposed to something that you yourself are operating. I don't know if that helps.
Well, that was very interesting. Michelle Price on Facebook says she really liked what you shared from your sister's quote.
Mm-hmm.
And she was wondering if you could reread it, or
Yeah.
she wanted to know if they could share your sister's quote in writing.
Yes. So she shared it as part of a longer message that she wrote today because she's, as a part of a class she's teaching. I'm happy to reread it. And then I'm happy to also, I can post this section of her quote either on Facebook or wherever if you want to hold on to it. So she said, when a river flows, it brings sediments with it: sand, pebbles, cobblestones, twigs, and leaves. When the sediments move and slide along the riverbed of solid rock, erosion occurs. And when the flow of the river remains powerful and consistent, the entire structure of the solid rock can be broken down and dismantled.
Excellent.
And I have chills every time I read that.
Moni says this insight has been amazing. Thank you. Is there any last things? We're just past the top of the hour. Is there something you wanted to share? Final comments? Is there a way? Will we be posting? You had it on all your slides, but if they wanted to follow you, because I know often
Sure.
you write amazing posts for Facebook and on your blog too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I've been writing less in recent weeks, trying to uplift other people's writings. But yes, if you are looking for me, you can find me on my website, betsybatista.com. And I am on Facebook and Instagram at Living Into Human Design is my handle and my page on both Instagram and Facebook. And I guess I would just want to end with just encouraging people to keep going. You know, I think that it can feel really, when things feel hard and it feels like, you know, again, we're looking at systems and structures and things that have been deeply embedded for, you know, hundreds of years here, mentalities and belief systems and then systemic structures, and it can feel really overwhelming. And just like my sister was saying about the river and the sediment, you know, when we keep going, when we keep flowing, when we get enough of us awake and on the front lines showing up for this, we can make the change. We can make it possible. And so I just want to encourage all of you to keep doing the work and showing up to align with your energies so that you can be sustainable, so you don't burn out, so that you can show up fully in your gifts. And let's usher in the new world together. Let's continue the dismantling, you know, and it's going to be uncomfortable in as graceful a way as we can, but be in it together, you know, through the discomfort, and then we can get to building something much better. So thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it.